to the rink, and we already have one, possibly two players in that position now. A new JOL driver will get in trouble for illegally driving younger players to the rink and, or, God forbid, get in an accident along the way. None of these scenarios is acceptable, and all completely negate the hard work that we've done to make this team a success, all for want of a bus. We are willing to work with you if you are willing to work with us. Therefore, we hope we leave tonight with a reasonable compromise to this situation.
Great, thank you very much. All right, any other public comments this evening? All right, seeing none, moving on to recognitions. Dr. Carpenter?
I have a few. First, we'd like to thank the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod for their grant in the amount of $250 to cover transportation for Harwich Elementary School's 4th grade trip to see the Cape Symphony on November 6th. We'd also like to thank the Art of Charity for their grant in the amount of $1,109 to Monomoy Regional Middle School. And then congratulate the Monomoy Regional Middle School robotics team led by teachers Nancy Gifford and Amanda McDowell. The team competed in the first robotics tournament last weekend. The students and teachers worked hard to program their robots and prepare their presentations, and we fielded 2 teams for the event. Shark team number 1 placed 4th and moved on to the state tournament on December 14th. And then as part of the community-supported project to ensure that students from Chatham Elementary School have easy access to books when not in school, we located today a little free library at the Lake Street Terrace Apartments in Chatham. This was done completely by donation and volunteers. We'd like to thank all of the organizations and businesses that supported the free library, including members of the Chatham Harwich Newcomers Club, their woodworkers group to help with the plans and design work to create and assemble the library boxes, and these were quite well done. The Shepley Wood Products donated all the lumber and wood for the project. Baskin Ace Hardware donated nails, screws, knobs, plexiglass, and more. West Marine donated clamshell vents. Chatham Elementary School students and our custodians painted the boxes, and the custodial staff helped with the installation. Lastly, the management of the Lake Street Terrace Apartments agreed to allow us to place the box near their main office for easy and protected access for children and families. The volunteers and donors were so generous that we were able to create 2 boxes and are deciding where best to locate the second one.
Great, thank you very much, Dr. Carpenter. Next item on our agenda, reports and discussions, the draft FY21 budget presentation.
Oh, pull it up. So in your packets, we have just a quick draft on where we're seeing the budget for next year. I think if we just sort of look big picture at it and the conversations that we've had, we are supporting all current programs, both the academic programs and extracurricular and athletic programs that we currently have going this year are in the draft budget for next year. There's one thing that, one big initiative or costly initiative that we will be putting in place, and that is a update of the elementary school ELA curriculum. The conversation that Katie and I have been having is to actually do that outside of the budget. So where our excess and deficiency is currently sitting, it would make sense for us to go and address it as a one-time large purchase, much the same way that we did Math and Focus in past years, so that we're not kind of having the budget go bigger, and then when you don't have that big purchase in the next year, shrinking back down. So the suggestion we have is that we use excess and deficiency. So the budget as it stands would be a $41,673,525 budget. The English curriculum that we are suggesting, and we'll go through presentations at later school committee meetings as the elementary staff working with Mark Smith sort of fine-tune which program they're looking at, but it's going to be in the neighborhood of about $120,000 that that we'd be looking at. There are at this time a whole bunch of unknowns. So I appreciate Cindy Gushy just before this meeting, was talking about that Chapter 70 funding looks like it's going to be up a little bit for the school districts, and I mentioned to Cindy that that the cynic in me sometimes is it's like, okay, if Chapter 70 goes up, what might potentially come down? So regional transportation, we don't know what the regional transportation will be. The minimum required contribution for each town still has to get set, and one of the big factors that we know that impacts minimum required contribution is how many students from each town are in public schools in Harwich and Chatham. And what we have seen, and at least what we're forecasting, is that there's significantly more students in schools from Harwich and fewer from Chatham. So when you have that shift happen, that's going to impact the minimum required contributions. So we can sort of estimate what the the cost of our budget might be on each town based on last year's number, but that minimum required contribution shift is going to potentially throw that estimate off. There are also charter school reimbursements that the district gets, and we don't know how much that's going to be. Our excess and deficiency should be certified, and as we think it's going to be a healthy balance that we've had. So we've been managing our funds well, so that that reserve, or that excess and deficiency reserve, I think is going to be a healthy place for us to go for the English curriculum. We have as the placeholders in there, based on the contracts we negotiated last year, we have those are in there. We have a 5% placeholder for health insurance. In past years, that has been that occasionally has gone much higher than 5%, but we think that the 5% is a comfortable place to be at this point. And one of the important things that we have done in this budget is we've reinstated the $50,000 towards stabilization. So we, 2 years ago, began to fund a stabilization account, and stabilization is something that the district can tap into if it needs to go, do any big capital project. And you can think of this as, if we needed to do artificial turf on the fields, replace roofs, so it's to help defray the costs of big projects when they come due. And we know that at some point we're going to have to redo the roof on the roofs on the 2 buildings in Chatham sooner rather than later. We know that the lifespan on artificial turf field is a little bit over 10 years, and we're about halfway into what's considered to be a lifespan on an artificial turf field. So there are going to be big projects, and it's important for us to go and plan for those. The reason we say we reinstate the $50,000, the budget conversations that we had last year to try to come in at an acceptable budget for our 2 towns, we went and removed that $50,000 for stabilization in last year's budget, so we're putting it back in. other things we should bring up, Katie?
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Is there anything else we should bring up?
Well, Katie Isernio, business manager, I think that this thing's... I think it is important that, to the process, just to reiterate the process a little bit about the 21 budget, all the meetings with all of the department heads, the principals, the athletic director, administrators, and then gathering all the information, and then we had a finance subcommittee meeting with the school committee and brought forward some of the conversations that were conducted at the building level and the administration level with the budget, and then put together this draft budget that represents just about a 2.26% increase over the prior fiscal year in the budget. But as Dr. Carpenter mentioned, there are so many unknowns at this point, and each week we get a little bit more information so that we would have a better sense of just where the whole budget lands at the beginning of the end of the process.
And I think, just as Katie mentioned, this draft is coming in at 2.26% increase, which is, I believe, in my time here, the smallest budget increase the school district has proposed for a budget. And in terms of anticipation, because of what I'd foreshadowed, that minimum contribution swing, it's not going to feel like that for Harwich. So, so there's a reasonable chance in the upcoming month, when we get the different variables that we drop in, when that minimum required contribution comes in, that 2.26% will shift a little higher than that on the Harwich side, and it's going to shift lower than that on the Chatham side, which is what happened last year. And so it's hard to really say what that assessment impact would be, but at least we can anticipate something like that happening.
Any questions, Ms. Scott?
Just a question about curriculum. So you mentioned that we used E&D for the math and focus, and the thought is to use that for the ELA for this year. Is that something you would anticipate suggesting going forward for all new curriculums, or is that just, my initial question was actually going to be, well, we just did math and focus, we just did ELA, are we going to be looking for science or social studies in the next couple of years, and therefore would you then suggest to use E&D, or?
So I think it makes sense if the E&D balance is strong and healthy and growing, and that's where we've been.
Right.
Both when we implemented the math and focus and as we look forward into next year. And I think it's using something like the E&D balance to offset the cost of a big curriculum purchase makes sense if it's a one-time thing, as opposed to if...
Well, I look at it as one time.
Right.
It's one time for ELA, but it's not one time
For new
curriculum, because we're
Right.
always going to be, that's where it's one time, but it's not one time.
Right, so, so I don't know when we may look at doing it's not every year that we're looking at doing this, so it's, it was 3 budgets ago that I think that we were looking at the math and focus.
More than that.
Maybe it's 4. But,
Going based on the age of my child, when he started it,
Second grade.
4 years ago. Thank you.
Tina?
Yes, I have a question regarding regional transportation. So that is, just for clarification, that is with the buses, because the buses are in-house. And can you remind me, because I know that was all recent, is this the first, I guess FY21 is the first full year, or was FY20? So FY21 is the first full year.
Right,
Right,
this is the first year that we've had.
Right, okay.
This current year, so this will be the second year for the buses.
Okay, the second year.
But the region, Tina, the regional transportation is the amount that the district gets reimbursed for transporting kids more than 1.5 miles just to and from school.
Okay.
And that's based on the cost of that. We submit information, and it's always, actually, they'll base the FY '21 number on the FY '19 end-of-year report that is submitted every year to the Department of Ed. So it's based on all of the costs to transport kids within 1.5 miles, beyond 1.5 miles from their homes, and then also some special education transportation. So we get reimbursed. And that reimbursement rate varies. It could be as low as 53%, or it could be as high as 70%. What the Department of Ed has is a bucket of money, if you will, annually budgeted for that, and depending on the costs, it gets divided up. If districts' transportation rates go up really high, that pie gets divided up a little smaller, or vice versa. So we will know that, again, January, February, when we get those numbers based on the FY '19 end-of-year report submittals.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Katie, I think maybe the line item she might be looking for is the one where the cost of the new buses might be.
Yes.
Well, the transportation.
Yeah.
What you said was good information.
Okay.
So thank you.
But do you know
I
what,
was curious, because I guess now that we're doing it in-house is kind of how I understood it, but I'm glad you gave me this information too.
So in
do you know
terms
what line would
Yeah.
you refer
It's
to?
in the
for
3,000s.
Okay.
Transportation is
Okay.
budgeted in the 3,000s.
Okay.
I did not bring the level of detail that we have behind the scenes, because I thought
That's
this was going
fine.
to just be a big
Yeah,
picture.
that's
But
fine.
we'll show,
okay.
Other
when we
school
do
services.
the presentation at the next meeting, just where the costs and savings are a smaller increase.
Okay, all right, thank you for that.
Terry?
Thanks, Katie. A couple of questions. One, belatedly, I should have asked this when Mrs. Tamboli was sharing the dilemma. It does connect with transportation, though. Are we in your letter referring to, and I did receive it and read it, but I'm drawing a blank, for the women's hockey program?
Boys.
All boys? Okay, so my question is, right, so we're really talking about both. I was gonna raise the question, boys hockey must also get their own transportation as of the past few years?
So, yes, so in years past, there has been, especially from the Mashpee side, they've had buses and their students get to the rink from a Mashpee operated bus and driver. We've had that in the past, but not this year. The way that.
You know what, actually, could I just have you come up to the podium if you don't mind? We're a little unorthodox what we're doing, but
Just to have it on my.
we'll do it. That's absolutely fine. If you can just introduce yourself, and if you don't mind just starting from the beginning, addressing
Sure.
Terry's question, that would be great.
I'm Paul Tambolio, the husband of Shannon Tambolio, and we have been part of the Mashpee Monomoy Monarchs hockey team since its inception, and we have had a number of different busing situations over the years. When the schools co-opted, they have had, in the past, Mashpee has had actually one of the coaches drive the Mashpee bus from Mashpee High School to the rink in Hyannis, and which is honestly, I think, the way it should be, because if you're a school district and you're coming together and you're going to provide a team, then I think that it should be in the best interest of the school district to make sure that it's safe transportation so that it avoids some sort of calamity like we saw in Falmouth a couple of years ago. So that's really all that this is about, is we want to try to make transportation safe for the students who go from here to Hyannis in the dark. We've had foul weather already in early December. It's only going to get worse until it gets better in the spring. This season happens to be, the hockey season goes over a very dangerous, treacherous time for young student drivers. We have only 2 seniors on the team. They are new drivers. There are hardly any students who have their license, particularly from the Monomoy School District. my own son Jonah and his younger brother. Jonah is anticipated to get his license in January, which serves no good really because he can't have anybody in the car with him. So, and many of our students are facing this dilemma this year. So as my wife Shannon was saying, it's difficult for the parents to try to leave work, make all of these different things happen, have kids enjoy a school-sanctioned team, and somehow put it together when the other side of the equation has the transportation sorted out. It's a very difficult situation for us. We actually have to drive a little bit farther than Mashpee as well. So I understand that, you know, there are budgetary constraints this year. We understand that. I think that there are a number of parents who would be willing to, you know, help pay and defray the cost of a safe driver for the buses that we already have out in the parking lot here. And I think that if we were to make it mandatory for all of the students who participate in the team, if we make it mandatory that, you know, no, you're not driving to Hyannis. My son Noah, who graduated last year, was a member of the hockey team. He plays for the Louisville Cardinals hockey team now. The hockey team in college, they have a bus to make sure that these types of accidents don't happen. So I don't think that we're treading into uncharted territory here. I think it makes sense. And I think if we would do for the football team or the baseball team or the softball team or the soccer team, we would consider it only right to do it for the hockey teams as well, sailing teams, tennis teams, golf teams.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Terry, does that address your question?
It does, thanks a lot.
This item's actually not on our agenda to discuss this evening. We can put it on the agenda for our next meeting, and that's absolutely fine, but because it's not on our public agenda that was published, the board can't, as far as I understand, we can't further discuss it until it's on here as an agenda item. And at that point, we can collect all of our information, which actually some of us on the board have already been collecting information regarding follow-up to the emails, because we don't obviously know all the finite details of the transportation and the budget and how this plays out and as far as the athletic department. So I just wanted to be very transparent about that, but because it's not on the on the agenda, we can't further discuss it. You know, clarification is absolutely fine, and I absolutely appreciate public comment, people coming and talking. That's what we're here for. So I will make sure that it is on our next agenda to discuss, and at that point, we should have all information collected that we can all preview before, discuss, and talk about, and then if there's a vote appropriate, to move forward.
And Mr. Russell, to anticipate your next question, an additional bus for this is not built into this FY21 budget.
I did have another question,
Okay.
which you didn't anticipate.
Okay.
Totally different topic. On your rough draft projection, which will have a lot of changes in it, OPEB. I don't see it here, but maybe it's buried in another
Line.
term other than OPEB.
We have it budgeted at our standard $100,000.
Okay.
Any other questions for Katie or Scott regarding the budget?
Just one
Yep.
quick thing to share. In terms of staffing, this is a level-staffed budget. One of the conversations that I had with the finance subcommittee is we know that we're seeing smaller cohorts coming in at Harwich Elementary School, and we shrank down the number of sections in the early grades and kindergarten and first grade. So we anticipate that we'll have one fewer section at Harwich Elementary School, but we also know that the current biggest cohort of students in the district is in 7th grade and will be reaching the high school next year. So, so we anticipate moving one FTE's worth of staffing to come up to the high school next year, and I would anticipate that we'll be seeing that same need over the next probably 3 or 4 years at the high school, as we see the high school start to increase fairly rapidly in the number of students that we would be seeing sort of removing staffing from the elementary level and from the middle school levels where it makes sense, and seeing the staffing follow the cohort up to the high school, because the high school is going to start sort of rapidly increasing in its enrollment. The middle school that has sort of experienced its peak enrollment is going to start dropping off after this biggest cohort leaves us, and will gradually get smaller, just like the elementary schools have been. But overall, level staff budget.
And in your packets, in addition to the one-page summary, there's also showing back the actuals going back to FY16, so you can be looking comparison, cost center to cost center.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Dr. Carpenter.
Madam Chair.
Oh,
Just-
sorry, Tina, I didn't see you.
it's okay.
Yep, Tina?
Just for clarification, only because the Tim Bellows, did I say that right? Tim Bellows are here. Just for clarification, with the transportation, with the athletic transportation, is that factored into, is it broken out for athletic, or does it go, like, where is that, if I'm sitting and looking at the budget?
The athletics is budgeted, there are two transportations. One is at the middle school and one is at the high school. So
Okay.
if you look at the high school in the 3,000s, you'll see athletic transportation.
Okay.
And then you'll see it at the middle school as well in the 3,000s.
Okay.
3,300, as a matter of fact. So it will show the athletic transportation there.
All right, thank you.
All right, great. Thank you. Moving on, next item on the agenda is the municipal use of school buses. Katie, answer it.
At the last meeting, we mentioned about an interest from potentially various other municipal departments to contract with the collaborative during the summer or when there is off time that the buses are not being used. And I wanted to get approval to entertain that with the collaborative. And I spoke with Paul Funk, who was the business manager for the Mashpee Public Schools. And what happens is there's an additional $1 assessed when somebody is using the bus like that, so that then we'll get an offset for our invoices for the following year. So it would be beneficial for just wear and tear on our buses a little bit. It would be $1 a mile assessed to that. So they have found that it worked out well, the partnership with the town of Mashpee and the Park and Rec there, and using it for their trips and things. So that's what that was all about.
And we have a vote required for that for this evening?
There isn't a contract or anything, it's
Yeah.
just that we give the collaborative our permission to reach out and to.
Start a conversation?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a motion for the municipal use of school buses to start that conversation?
I'll make that motion. I move that we give the collaborative permission to start conversations with the municipalities for use of our buses during non-school year times.
I would second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions? No?
I just haven't thought about it, because this is the first it's been on here.
No.
That was
No.
last meeting.
I wasn't here,
Okay.
so
So,
Yeah.
First item.
abstention or, no, not
abstention, I
Well,
don't know.
it's not a conflict, so it's
No.
a no.
I just don't know what to vote, so I'm not voting yes or no. Trying to abstain.
Okay, we're gonna abstain for sharing. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda would be the FY19 prior year invoice approval. Oops, sorry, I'm already in action items, look at me go. Woo! Reports and discussion, student voice representation at other school committees. This was something that the school committee goals had discussed, having our student voice and representation at our meetings as they are, and maybe talking about different roles they would play on our committee. So really it's to open conversations regarding this, if anyone has had any further thought, suggestions. And you have in your packet the Student Advisory Committee Administration of Government handout. I don't know if, Scott, do you have something that,
I can give some context. So and I was actually doing a little email search back to how many times something like this has come up in conversations. And Sharon, you'll appreciate this, but Sharon sent me an email back in, it was October 15th, 2014. We've been having, conversations over the years, and Sharon, so as we were, really first coming together as a fully regionalized school district, and Sharon was, sharing, actually this exact passage from Mike Gilbert from the Mass Association of School Committees had sent to Sharon what I've provided to you. And so this is Chapter 71, Section 3M of the Mass General Laws that that states that school committees should have student representation on their boards. And so I actually reached out to our lawyer who is on his own school committee. He's so the district's lawyer is on the school committee at Ashland, and was just asking him how Ashland does student representation, and have been just touching base with other districts. I think many of them do it very differently. I don't think any of them do it exactly like Section 38M lists with, it sort of prescribes what that student representation should look like. I think if we even look at this year, Jamie Buffington has been coming here and doing reports for you. It would be well within this body's right to go and say, hey, reach out to the high school and say, we'd like to have Jamie or a representative actually sit at the table, and they, so the way the law reads is that they are a voice during discussions, but not part of executive sessions and not part of a vote. And in my former district, that's how we would have somebody that would be at the table, and I think it's a good thing to have. The twist, though, is, and this nothing against Jamie. Jamie comes to us, at least my understanding from Principal Burkhead when I spoke to him today. Jamie has come not by way of student government, but I think the staff and the guidance folks here sort of felt that Jamie would be a great spokesperson for the school. And again, the way the law reads is that Jamie or whomever is coming to sit at the table should be somebody that's elected by their peers and comes out of a student government. And so again, how Jamie comes and gives presentations is up to you on do you want to continue doing that? You could extend the invitation to have Jamie be part of the table, or we could go work with the high school to sort of come more in line with the way the law reads, and have the student rep come out of student government and have an election to have student representatives decide who's going to be at the table.
Joanne?
So I just want to clarify. I think I got this. According to the law, the student that's our representative is determined by a student vote within the school. That's how that goes. It's not us doing any.
Right. So in this, it speaks to that that the student advisory committees are, I think like the fourth line on this, composed of students elected by the student body.
Elected by student body,
And, So, again, we had, if I, just speak of my former district, there was a student government council, and the council decided, so the council was elected, and that body of students decided who their rep would be at the table. I think that's, again, a way to go. I mean, I think when I was talking with Mark Terry, our attorney, he was saying this is sort of a vision of how it could be, and I think every committee seems to do something that fits them in their situation. And I think over the last several years, we've had great reports, from Jamie this year, and also from middle school and elementary school students. So it's how it's been here. But I think the goal has been to sort of enhance that student voice at our meetings, and one of the things that hasn't happened over the years is we have sort of every other time we get, or it's about every other meeting we get a report, as opposed to have somebody who has a standing seat at the table.
Terry?
I appreciate a couple of times a month the student coming and reporting. I think the ones that have been chosen, regardless of the guidelines that haven't been voted, they've done an excellent job. My concern, and I would think that if we want to enlarge the role and allow the student government in some form to have a vote, we could either do that this year, but I would be sensitive to Jamie's presence with us, no matter how she got here. So I would suggest we look forward to next year and maybe set up an arrangement in which the student government elects one or whatever number we wish. The other, and I think that's terrific, the other thought strikes me, I know how busy as a grandparent these kids are in high school, and how many of them who are the doers, doing work at home and are in drama and are in sports, and to think that one of them, without any credit, would be elected and then would have to be here 2 nights every month throughout the school year, some nights till 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night. I don't really see the advantage of that unless somehow the school would be able to give a community credit in the way of, not AP, but some sort of a credit that they're getting and not a thank you note. Something that would be on their school record, that they, like a course. Otherwise, I would find it to be, I know some of these youngsters are challenging when they come and report out, and then they scoot out to go home to get their work done. So that's for another time, but I think that this year we've launched our year with a very credible, capable young lady. I think maybe we could continue this next 5 months, and how can we work at that next year if the student, I'm not sure if she's a junior or senior, but could be a fresh start with someone who would be elected via some student body, and then they would be the representative. The question I have in my own mind is to sit here. I think that'd be terrific, but what student has that time to do that without feeling the strain?
Thank you, Terry. Joanne?
I agree with what Mr. Russell has said. If a student decides to run for that kind of a program, I see it as an elected program, to tell you the truth, rather than an appointed program. That student is letting you know that that's their interest, that's their time. It's like a sport. Kids devote hours to sports, and so they make that choice along with their parents, obviously. But I don't see it as anything different than another activity that the kids do. And when they raise their hand and say, I'd like to run for this position, then they're saying, I'm going to do the job and I have the time. My question is, do you have to align it with their election system here within the high school? I feel like it should be kind of placed in their hands as opposed to us making the decision. as to when they elect. If we wait too long till the end of the year, then what happens at the first meeting next year? I guess that's what I'm looking at.
That's all really good feedback, Joanne and Terry, and I think this is exactly what we need to be doing, is having the conversation, because this is one of our school committee goals, and to have the conversation and look at it and talk about it, and how do we want to make it work. In my opinion, and I would agree that this is an elected position, and it would become part of that position. Knowingly, they would go into that election knowing it was part of it. And maybe you format it differently. Maybe they're only responsible to come to one meeting a month versus 2 meetings. It's a heavy agenda, maybe there's a pass. You know, there's flexibility within it. I think the important part for them is the exposure, and there's absolutely the interest, and maybe just diversifying that interest outside of, you know, a president of the senior class, what else that could look like. And I say president of the senior class because I feel like in the past, all of our speakers have been seniors. And correct me if I'm wrong, and
I think we had
junior,
one year
do we have
where-
1 year we had 2 in a row?
Well, juniors, yeah, she overlapped.
Okay. And they've all been excellent. It's like my highlight, and I'm sure one of them's in chorus tonight or something is why we don't have one tonight. But, and I certainly don't want to disrupt anything Jamie's doing this year, because she's already there, and this is the year that we're going to talk about it, see how it looks, so we can roll into it in the fall. I naturally look at it going, well, you've got 4 class presidents that are elected. Does it work into that role of their responsibilities? Does it go into a rotation of those 4 of all class? You know, just thoughts. So, all good stuff. I'm wondering if we should put together some type of a subcommittee to talk about what we've just talked about, the possibilities, outline what we want it to look like. If there's anybody interested in following up with that, perhaps working with Dr. Carpenter as well, if needed, talk about what a student advisory committee looks like, and proceed with that so that we can maybe have a follow-up after the new year, maybe in February. We'll be somewhat through budget at that point, and then we can kind of get something, because I know it's part of our goal is to have, this was our planning year for this, so if we can have something outlined for February, that would be great. Sharon?
I had a lot of things to say about it, but since you're on the subcommittee idea, possibly the policy subcommittee might just be a good group we could put this on.
Is it a?
It's not a policy.
Right.
I'm just saying that some of the things that we might do about this might be similar to that. That we're changing something. We have different ideas, like I do agree with Joanne about having somebody elected, but then how would, and I like Terry's idea also about having maybe it open to a few people to do. But we have to kind of think about it since it is a new format.
Okay. Nancy?
I think it would actually behoove a ad hoc group from our committee meeting with whomever at the high school. Because I think that if we have all these fantastic ideas of what we would like to see, and then we bring them to Bill or whomever at the high school, and they say, well, yeah, that's not really going to work because of X, Y, and Z. So I think if we start the conversation with whomever at the high school in the beginning, that would probably be more productive. And I still think, you know, a group of school committee members can meet with him. It doesn't have to be just somebody, one from us and somebody from the high school, but I think it's more beneficial time-wise to sit down with, would Bill be the most appropriate person, or I'm not sure who at the high school?
I think a combination of Bill and Jen and Jamie, and, you know, maybe John Bennett from guidance.
But I think just taking the ideas, just even to start with, that it seems like more or less it's more of an elected position, and would it work into their schedules? Would it be somebody who's already been elected? So I am not volunteering, just so we know.
No, actually, Terry, just as a thought, rather than have another subcommittee, I would suggest our vice chair and chair meet with the principal and the guidance folks for an hour and flesh out our ideas and their needs and how this all
Well
could all come
delegated
about.
right there.
Pardon?
Good delegating.
Well delegated.
He's getting me back for something.
That's why you do.
Hey, Madam Chair.
Tina, yes?
Just a quick question and clarification, because we're talking about high school, but it says student advisory committees. So is this strictly for high school, or, because we've got some great middle school
Very good point.
kids and even elementary. So I don't, when you say student representative, to me, that means a student, and who are the constituents? So I would ask us to think about that too.
And I would say maybe how you would adapt, my opinion, how you would adapt that role as middle school, maybe takes on that middle school update position as part of a growing, so that when you're in high school, it morphs into a more, or a different role, but that's kind of in preparation. You know, we get the middle school sometimes, but not consistently, but that would be a great idea. Scott, and then Sharon.
While it's a short passage, but while we didn't read it, it's the law is specifically high school.
Yeah, I saw that.
And I don't disagree with you. I actually think this is one of the reasons why I think committees across the state have sort of carved out their way about doing this, because I think our middle school students who do come here and give reports have a lot to go and offer about what's working and what they'd like to see in their school, just like high school kids. But the law is very specific about it being high schoolers, and that they're, and if we were to take it at, the way it's written, it's that there are 5 high school students. I think where this high school differs from my former high school was very big in terms of its student government focus, that was sort of like an all grades type of student government, and this school has a very strong student, it's sort of like a class officer system in terms of how it operates, and I think that's where any conversations, do you do this as an additional position that each class has, and you get your 5 individuals so that you have an 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grader that way. And then if we're doing it the way the law reads, that those 5 then vote on who amongst the 5 is going to represent them. But I would agree with Joanne. I think that if it's spelled out what the expectations are up front, I think you'll find students who are very interested in it being their activity. And I think students who have a strong propensity for public service down the road and getting into that line will go run. And I think I mentioned this maybe last time we had the conversation. I mean, Julian Sear, Senator Sear, started as the Nauset student rep. He was at the table at Nauset, and that's where he started into his first foray in government. Happened while he was in high school.
That's interesting. Thank you. Sharon.
And I would just like to add myself to that group to meet with Bill and them, because clearly I've had an interest for quite a while.
Sure.
Thank you.
All
goes
right,
back to
we'll try and put
2014.
something on the calendar, and then
Thank
maybe
you.
have something to present in February. And Tina.
Just one other clarification, because I know we're talking about the class presidents, which makes a lot of sense, but we also have a student council at this high school, and I believe they represent the entire student body. So I guess I would want, are they in competition with each other? Because you've got the student council leaders and then the class leaders. So I don't know, things that we, I guess, would think about.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you, Tina. And if you could remind me. Perfect, thank you.
Joe had his hand up.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Joe. Hi, Joe.
Good evening, Madam Chair.
I see you over there. Thank you.
The more you read this little document, the more nuanced and interesting it becomes, and is incumbent on us perhaps to have a subcommittee to evaluate it. I mean, and consider what we do. Dr. Carpenter rightly pointed out the first paragraph requires representation from high schools, but there's nothing that prohibits representation from middle schools in a separate category. That's not out of our purview. Actually, the first paragraph says the school committee shall meet at a certain time with student advisory committee to consist of 5 members. We're meeting with a committee of 5. That's what the first paragraph says. That's not necessarily Thursdays at 6:30. We can meet with a committee of 5 before school, maybe with a bus to pick us up and get us all here. We can meet before school, after school, during school, prior to our meetings. We're meeting with a committee of 5. That committee of 5 students elects one person who has certain authority. That person serves for a year and is a ex officio non-voting member of the school committee. There's a lot of ways in which this can be put into practice. And this isn't so much a blueprint as a rather fuzzy map, let's say, that can lead in a number of interesting directions. I fear if I speak any more, it would suggest I'm volunteering for a subcommittee. And and last night I was on a subcommittee last night where I was being volunteered for subcommittees of my other subcommittee, which gets to be a little bit complicated, but there is much to discuss here is what I wanted to say, more than a few minutes of, yeah, this looks good, it's all in favor. There's really a lot of thought that need go into this. And having said that, Madam Chair, I will yield back.
And attend the meeting. Perfect. Okay. Thank you, Joe. Moving on, we're going to go past the subcommittee reports. The policy is not in our packet. Moving on to superintendent's report, the universal pre-K at Chatham Elementary.
Just to give a little explanation on why it's not in your packet. Apparently, it's, so the thing that's not in the packet is a policy on the preparation and distribution of potassium iodide. For those who don't know why one would ever distribute potassium iodide, it's if you have a nuclear reactor that we're melting down and you distribute potassium iodide as a preventative while we're all fleeing as far away as possible. And
I'm getting on a boat, or I'm taking the evacuation route on the highway.
And as you all know, although they have, now they're closing down Pilgrim, which has been the worry and why both Harwich and Chatham stockpile potassium iodide. Just because the power plant gets shut down, the spent fuel is still going to be there for quite some time while they figure out what to do. So there are procedures both in Chatham and Harwich to go dispense potassium iodine if there are worst case scenarios. And Melissa, I think, could walk you through what some of the procedures are that our 2 towns have with regard to this at our next meeting. So we didn't look at it like we needed a school policy because there are procedures in both towns through the Department of Health.
Great.
Okay. In terms of my report, Universal Pre-K at Chatham Elementary School, Robin and I met with the town manager from Chatham, the finance director, and Andy Speakman, who has a lot of different roles in Chatham, to share with them the memo that I've shared with this group, that our lawyer's opinion is that the school district can't run a pre-K at Chatham Elementary School unless we're also doing the exact same thing at Harwich Elementary School. But we could be in a position to have our space at Chatham Elementary School used to have a preschool program that the town is running for 4-year-olds. So I think that's sort of the easy thing. the more challenging thing is, what does that program really look like in terms of what the recommendation is going to be from them to the select, to their select board? Is it a program that is running on a school day, school year calendar? So does it start at roughly 7:30 in the morning and go till 2:30 in the afternoon, 180 days? Or does it run like the preschool programs that parents pay for over at Harwich Elementary School, where if you have a 4-year-old, you could drop them off as early as 7 o'clock in the morning and pick them up at 5:30 in the afternoon? And is it doing that for families over the course of 180 days, or is it doing that for families over the course of a year? So I've provided some just suggestions on, on an approach, that I think might make sense. But we also, offered to be part of a subcommittee to resolve what that recommendation would be. I think if I had my magic wand and could go and say, what would be a nice thing to be able to see looking forward for families in both of our towns, I think if we could see some way that families could be covered for wraparound services, at least for the 180 days of our school year, regardless of what age your child is, so that what's happening after school at Harwich Elementary School, what's happening after school at Chatham Elementary School is paid for ultimately by the towns. I think that would go and support our young families, because the want where this is ultimately coming from with the universal preschool at Chatham is to see young families find a way to viably live here on the Cape, and to see more young families in the town of Chatham. And I think that might be a thing to sort of strive for. I think the challenge that that I shared with the town manager is, if you could imagine that we put in this great service for age 4, where we've got the families covered from 7 to 5:30, but then they get a year older and they go to kindergarten, and parents are now having to pay for after school care, and so it's so how do you make it so that it's there's a perk and it's a sustained perk. So that on universal pre-K. One other thing, just to sort of respond to the Tambolios, and the hockey folks, I have done some initial research just with regard to hockey, and I think it would probably be better at our next meeting to have Principal Burkhead and Karen Gilmet, the athletic director, share the information, so that there's not the telephone piece where the information shared has a slight attrition, but just some of the history on this. I think that when anyone asks for, could we have an extra bus, or could we have an extra program after school, the thing that Katie will make fun of me is, it's like, is it in the budget? And the reality of transportation for hockey this year is it's not in the FY20 budget, the current year budget, and as Terry asked, it's not in the draft that we currently have put together for FY21. It's not that it couldn't go into the draft, but if we fund something this year, one of the bigger questions that the school committee then has to have is, where do we take it from out of the budget to go fund something new? It's a draft budget. The FY21 is still a draft budget and still plastic enough that way. I appreciate that folks also kind of mentioned if we do this for the boys, we would need to do it for the girls. Legally, under Title IX, if we do something for boys, and on the boys' side of sports, we have to do something for the girls' side of sports, or you're going to have a lawsuit that's going to have you do something on the girls' side of sports plus pay a penalty. So there's a Title IX implication. So we did last fund transportation in 2018. It was at the time $186.30 a day for the transportation. I'm guessing that it's about $200 roughly would be sort of the cost that we'd have to price this at. And over the course of a season, that's about $9,000 for transportation for one sport. So if we were doing it for boys, $9,000. If we were doing it for the girls, it could be another $9,000. There are also other equity issues that are out there that you can imagine different sets of parents coming and saying, we would like transportation to and from off-site sporting events too, or sporting practices, so we currently don't provide transportation for boys golf, girls golf at the high school or at the middle school. We have sailing that is off-site. So if you can imagine if we were to then fund transportation for all of those, if we're still looking at roughly $9,000 a sport, the number starts to get bigger than $9,000 and now starts to approach $50,000. At least on from one of the emails that I had gotten from our athletic director, Ms. Gilmet, she believes that the only school that provides hockey transportation currently is in Falmouth, at Falmouth. And it may be that the transportation that gets provided, the rink in Falmouth is 3 miles from the high school, that I think it's an after-school route that students who don't drive can just jump the bus to the rink, much the same way that students jump the bus here to go to the library, or from the middle school to go to the library, or for here to go to to Chatham Rec. But the families are responsible for picking up at the rink. I mean, it is after all in town. I believe that Mashpee currently doesn't provide the transportation. I don't know. I don't go to the, but I think at least currently Mashpee doesn't provide transportation to the Hyannis rink, and I don't know if they provide it when they. I guess most of the time they practice in Hyannis, and once a week is at Tony Kent and Dennis. So I think Karen can provide a little more clarity on all of that. And I think the important thing is at the end of the day, all of our athletes and are responsible, or their families are responsible for getting them home from here. And I think that I definitely my heart goes out to the families that lost children in an accident, and I think that's a challenge that we face with teen drivers, period, and we've got kids that are leaving every day from here after sports, and those are things that we have to kind of keep in mind. How do we go and keep teen drivers safe across the board?
Great. Thank you, Dr. Carpenter.
And then I just have one last thing. I know every minute counts.
No, every minute matters. Where is she? There she is.
It is the holiday season, and I had mentioned that I wanted to make sure that we at least acknowledge our school committee members from days gone by. So my gift to y'all
Oh, boy.
is we have our
Sharon, look at that.
our membership
Are you an original?
that we can put on the wall. We can update when people go off, but at least we have the ability to go and acknowledge that Ann Haggerty, Glenn Bryant, and Ed Jaworski are former members who are no longer with us, served with us. We can put it on the wall here, and we can go and add more as time goes on, and we have more school committee members join. So, Madam Chair, here you go.
Oh, wow.
Is there any chance to get wall size?
Can we each have a 5x7?
And I'd like to thank Leah for her help. Good handwriting, Leah? No.
Wow.
Calligraphy, yeah.
You legit wrote that?
No, I really,
Oh,
because
yeah, I
with the
was like,
lefty
wow.
smudge, there's no pulling it off.
No.
Well, thank you, Dr. Carpenter. On behalf of the school committee, this is wonderful, and past and present members, and for some of them, they don't take up any more space. We're just gonna keep the end date empty. Ms. Scott? Mr. Russell? Sharon? All right, great. That's fantastic. I'm gonna pass it over to Leah. And I believe, what do we have left? We have a invoice, the FY19 prior year invoice approval, the Cape and Vineyard Electrical Cooperative. There is an explanation letter that Katie had requested. It's in your packet regarding the two invoices that are from the prior year that we are approving tonight. Are there any questions, or is there a motion?
Why are you looking at me?
Maybe I'm not.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Ms. Scott.
I move to approve the prior year invoice dated 7/8/2019 to Cape and Vineyard Electric Cooperative in the amount of $374.35, and the invoice dated June 8, 2019 to Cape and Vineyard Electric Cooperative in the amount of $213.78.
Is there a second?
Second it.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any noes, abstentions? Motion carries. And then at this time, we also have the presentation of the warrants this evening. And at this time, we actually have added public comment, so there's an opportunity for speakers, again, limited to 5 minutes, to come up and speak at the end of our meeting, if there's anyone else with any additional comments at this time. Seeing none. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Now he jumps in.
Thanks.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Happy holidays, Merry Christmas to everybody.
Meeting adjourned.
We still have time to see the concert.
I know, fantastic. So,